Hello, my name is Takeo Nakajima, JETRO Hanoi. Interestingly, all the speakers from JETRO today, Mr. Takahara from Sydney, Mr. Hisatomi from Singapore, and myself worked at JETRO Americas office before. We now work in the Asian and Oceania offices. This may imply the closer relation between the Americas and Asia now. The map of Vietnam, the land area is 1/5 of Mexico. One notable character of Vietnam is this country has two largest cities, Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, and several mid-sized cities, Haiphong, Da Nang, and Can Tho. So foreign companies may see more options to invest. On the other hand, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines have one big city and many small cities. Overview. Like anywhere globally, ASEAN is heavily impacted by COVID-19, although the region is less so than Europe and the Americas. Vietnam, Singapore, and Australia were excellent in controlling the outbreak of the pandemic. Vietnam, however, now faces the uncertain situation of whether the third wave will explode or not. I want to show you some pictures that demonstrate Vietnam's business sentiment under the pandemic. Since last May, Japan, South Korea, and other countries have assisted people in flying to Vietnam under strict quarantine measures. Still very limited in numbers, but critical businesses resumed quickly in the earlier stage. As you see on the right, we JETRO carried offline business events if the circumstances allowed. Economic dialogues. The last September and October were very significant months for the Japanese business community in Vietnam. On the left is the dialogue with Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc, and this person is me. On the right is Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga's first official visit since his taking office. And business dialogues continue. The relation between the political leaders in Vietnam and the business people is very close. Why? Because Vietnam's economy is still small and it needs foreign direct investment. More than 60 to 70% of Vietnam's exports and imports are through foreign companies in Vietnam. Vietnam needs FDI, and we need the government to improve business conditions. So both sides have a reason to meet. GDP. The annual GDP growth in 2020 was 2.9%. The plus figure, but much worse than the previous years. The second quarter in 2020 was the bottom, and the most recent quarter was 4.5%. The manufacturing sector was relatively healthier because there has been a very limited production halt during the pandemic. Now, the Vietnamese government has set a GDP growth target for 2021 at 6%. Import and export. Both imports and exports keep growing at double digit until 2019. In 2020, exports increased by 7% and imports by 4%, the smallest increase in recent history. With more growing exports than imports, Vietnam's trade surplus has grown to nearly $20 billion. Import and export by country and by goods. Vietnam imports parts and materials from China, South Korea, and Japan. Then Vietnam assembles and exports final or semi-final products to the US, China, and Japan. Even during the pandemic, Computer electronic products and parts have maintained a double-digit increase in export and import. People need computers in staying and working home, but not new cell phones so much. Apparel and footwear decreased due to the slump of the foreign markets. You don't need nice jacket and shoes when working at home. The exports to the US increased and the imports decreased. The trade surplus with the US has grown to $63 billion in 2020, leading Vietnam to the third largest trade deficit of the US, next to China and Mexico. So now we are allies. FDI into Vietnam. The FDI kept growing until 2019. In 2020, however, the number of FDI projects and value were sluggish. The government approval process slowed down, and many companies canceled or postponed the project process. Also, immigration restrictions caused a severe project disruption in some cases. Japanese companies in Vietnam. Regarding the direction of business development in the next 1 to 2 years, by JETRO survey, 47% of Japanese companies in Vietnam answered expansion. The number is among the highest, but it was much lower than that of last year, 64%. The percentage of companies that answered shrinking or moving out to another country is bigger at 5% and 0.7% respectively. So overall, it is a mixed picture. The question about the reason why the companies expand business. In Vietnam, increased sales in the local market, 66%, and increased sales due to expanded exports, 49% were the top reasons for expansion. In Thailand and China, however, the Japanese companies put more emphasis on the domestic market. Obstacles. These are the obstacles in the region. The wage increase in the lead is the top issue for many countries in this region. However, the wage increase has eased due to the economic slowdown and the fragile employment situation. The green indicates low local procurement. In Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, this is a critical issue, but not in China, Thailand, and Malaysia. The blue is a decrease in business order. The percentage of this answer jumped 20 to 30 points from the previous year across the region. And the answer quality of employees in the bold black is seen in Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines, but not in Vietnam. Local procurement. One of Vietnam's prolonged issue is a low local procurement rate, just 37% in the recent survey. The gap with China has hardly narrowed. The Vietnamese government wants to improve the situation for a long time. The low local procurement may incur unexpected disruption of material supply, higher or fluctuating cost, and poor quality control. One of the hot topics in Asia's manufacturing space is shifting supply chain. The JETRO survey indicated about 9% of Japanese companies in Vietnam had a plan to transfer production to Vietnam since the US higher tariffs against China and rising costs in China. However, China has many advantages over Vietnam. The mass producing capacity, sufficient local suppliers, and advanced logistics and infrastructure, and skillful engineers. So the transformation is slowly progressing. Invest Japan. Lastly, more Vietnamese enterprises established a corporation or branch in Japan over the last 5 years. Most of the companies are IT digital related. LQA opened the service in Yokohama, Japan last year, and the Vietnamese IT giant FPT already has more than 10 branches across Japan. Cost-competitive IT service with Japanese language ability is a typical Vietnam's strength. So conclusions. Vietnam has various functions with Japanese business from Japan to Vietnam and from Vietnam to Japan. Vietnam attracts companies as an exporting base and a growing domestic market. When I was in the US, I thought the Americas and Asia were close enough and even getting closer, but the Asian countries themselves are far more intertwined than I expected. So suppose you want to expand business in Asia, you should have a business entity in one of the countries, Japan, China, Singapore, Australia, or Vietnam. That's it from me. I hope the information is valuable to your business with Asia. Thank you.